conversation, which is connecting right now. I actually pretty sure it's already started. It's funny, I always think it hasn't started because I'm always stuck talking. So on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Yusuf Miller, Activist San Diego's Executive Director, to get things kicked off.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our community event. And this is going to be an exciting presentation. I'm really excited to see it. And I want to make sure that when we do our land acknowledgement, I'll do mine, that I'm here in the land of the Lapane. And I just want to make sure that we're inclusive when we're talking about where we are and we're doing a land acknowledgement, and not all of us are in the same place. So here in Activist San Diego, our community forum, I'm looking forward to a great presentation. I'm going to give a little bit of information on what we've been up to as Activist San Diego. We've been supporting the Saving Lives in Custody campaign, which the bill has now changed numbers to AB 268. And that bill is now, it passed through the Public Safety Committee and is going to be going up in the chain, and we need everyone's support. We have now at this time have 2 in custody deaths in the jails, 1 in the state, and 2 in the detention centers here in San Diego. So the sheriff is not responsible for all of them. She's responsible for the 2 in the jails, but the issue is clear that we have a lot of in custody deaths. Secondly, I would like to say that just this past few days, the families from San Diego drove up to Sacramento, 7 to 8 hour drive to the rally against police violence, along with other people who have lost lives to law enforcement, and they were well received. San Diego was, they really appreciated San Diego coming out and standing up strong. Activist San Diego also supported that venture, and I monitored it from Pennsylvania. I couldn't actually be there, but I monitored everything, and everything was going great. Just try to give them as much support as possible. And they had a life-changing experience, the ones who went there for the first time. And another issue that's coming up that a lot of us need to be aware of is that there's been significant changes in the street lights, the video camera, the surveillance lights in San Diego. They have a policy now, but that policy is, of course, substandard, and more to come on that, how we're going to attack that and make sure that it is a policy that protects our rights from being surveilled by Big Brother. And lastly, I'll talk about San Diego. Activist San Diego is very in tune with the environment and clean energy, and for that reason, we are definitely we're fire SDG&E. You know, if you live in San Diego, that SDG&E is burning through our pockets with no remorse. And the people who make the less money are the people who are most affected and most impacted. So we have an event coming up on that, and I won't go into too many details because I believe Francis will jump into that. So that is the executive report, and I'll turn it back over to you, Francis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yusuf. I'm going to actually pass over to Martin for an announcement of an event for this Saturday, and then I'll cover some other events.
I want to quickly acknowledge some of what Activist San Diego has done in the past. 20 years ago was the launch of the war in Iraq that cost the lives of 5,000 American soldiers, 250,000 Iraqis, devastation of the country, all based on lies and misinformation. And very pertinent to today's discussion. All of those people who have gone to war, and when they find out that they have been lied to, come back with serious challenges, oftentimes mental illness associated with the terror of fighting a war without a cause, and to recognize what has been done to the population. It's moral injury that eats away at somebody's soul. But there's somebody who suffered that trauma here in San Diego. Fernando Suarez del Solar lost his son in the first week of the war. Was told by the Pentagon that he died in valiant struggle against the enemy. He was to find out from an ABC reporter who died with his son because there was no medics and he bled to death out in the desert, that in fact he had been killed by a US cluster bomb that was unmarked when they were strafing the countryside with cluster bombs, anti-personnel bombs that are against the Geneva Accords and outlawed. But the story of Fernando Suarez, in a sense, began there as he became an internationally known and locally known peace activist. The reason I mention this today on the 20th anniversary of this atrocity is that Fernando is calling on people to visit the peace tree that he planted up in South Escondido, across the road from where his son went to high school, at 3 p.m. at Kit Carson Park in South Escondido. Would love to have you come and be a testament to a community that supports those people who fight for peace and social justice. And Fernando is certainly, he's going to join us in a bit, but he's picking up his wife. And so I made the announcement for him. So at any rate, I will put some more information in the chat. Would love to have each and every one of you, and thank you all for being here. I will say that Activist San Diego really began in mobilizing against the war, and we were part of two conveners of the San Diego Coalition for Peace and Justice that brought out week after week thousands of people to try to stop that war from starting. We're proud of that past, and it's borne out. You know, all of what we were saying turned out to be true about an atrocity being committed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. And note, it's 1 p.m. 1 p.m. on Saturday, March 20. What month is it? This is, sorry, that is Saturday, March 25th, in Kit Carson Park in Escondido, at the Peace Tree Memorial. And a couple other items of note. Activist San Diego is a proud member of the Public Power San Diego campaign, and we have a lot of activities coming up. Hopefully you have heard that April 1st, we are having a mass rally at City Hall in Civic Center Plaza. This is going to be from noon to 2 o'clock. It's going to be a rally and press conference. We're going to have tables with people giving out information about various things. If you have an organization that would like to table, definitely let us know. We will also have an amazing band called the Resistors performing live for us. This is going to be a real treat. We're excited about that. And our demands there are the city council negotiated the franchise agreement with SDG&E, the privately owned, investor-owned utility, which has a monopoly here in San Diego County. They make a profit, a net profit of $1 million a day from San Diego city residents, and in the whole area, $3 million a day. They, however, are currently saying that they, well, there's recently been these rate spikes. So we're calling on the city council to do their job and investigate and do hearings and figure out why SDG&E can't plan better as far as gas prices and electricity prices. So that rally on April 1st is going to be focused on city council and pushing them to, better oversight and to begin what they've already said they're starting to do is going to have hearings to start exploring the possibility of San Diego transitioning to real public power, not just a community-owned aggregate that's reselling their power, but a real public power, such as in Sacramento and other places where there's, people aren't getting exploited for profit on something that we need. Simultaneously, SDG&E has their general rate case. So SDG&E is not only not being accountable for these the past, they're actually saying that they need to raise rates on us again. And they do this every, I think, 10 years, they're allowed to ask a judge whether or not they can raise the rates again. So this Thursday, March 23rd, there's 2 more opportunities for the public to make a comment in this hearing before a judge. And this is called the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission's hearing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I will put more information in the chat as soon as I'm done talking, and you can go to Activist SD on Instagram and on Facebook, and we've got events for these and graphics that you can share with your friends, and please help spread the word and come out if you're able to Thursday, this Thursday, 2 o'clock or 6 o'clock. Also, in preparation for our April 1st rally, we are going to have 2 opportunities where we're going to get out in the streets and do some banner hanging over the freeways. This issue around SDG&E and these pay hikes and whatnot is actually a really powerful issue to bring the community together across all partisan lines, and everyone is dealing with this common challenge. So it's a really great time to spread the word and build our movement. So those opportunities are going to be Thursday, March 28th and 30th at 4:30 to 6 o'clock. And I will put the flyers and the information in the chat as well for that. If you come out and do the banners waving with us, maybe we'll go get dinner afterwards. That's my invitation to everyone to come on out. And another coalition that Activist San Diego is a member of is the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. And for, I think, almost about 15 years of the organization of Activist San Diego has been part of this alliance. But I will state that this is one opportunity that we would really love to see more and more of you all start participating in the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance work as a member of Activist San Diego. Why? Because it's a really badass coalition of over 64 organizations across the country, frontline groups, people led really, at the front of change making, focused on demilitarization, on the climate crisis, and on increasing support for the care economy and connecting all these things together. So a couple opportunities coming up I want everyone to know about. And again, I'll put information in the chat soon. The next Grassroots Global Justice all member call is going to be Thursday, March 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific. That is 4 p.m. Eastern, but 1 p.m. Pacific. And this member call is going to be the first since our October member assembly, in which the Alliance voted on some significant things, including launching an Invest in Care, Divest in Harm campaign framework that we'll all be building together, in launching the International Feminist Organizing School, which we'll be part of and be helping to being able to participate and help build, and the Feminist Peace Initiative. There's another call on April 18th, specifically for the Feminist Peace Initiative. That is actually a coalition of GGJ and Madre and Women Cross DMZ, amazing organizations that have come together. And Tuesday, April 18th from 3 to 5 Eastern time, we'll be coming together in a roundtable to discuss feminist U.S. foreign policy strategies to challenge authoritarianism and address the transnational and coordinated right-wing backlash against progressive social movement gains for gender rights, peace, and climate justice. Again, Zoom link will be in the chat soon. And for those watching on the Facebook live stream, I will share them there as well. Do follow Activist SD on Instagram and Facebook, where we share all of these events. And without further ado, it's my great honor to introduce Briana and Isabella from Breaking Down Barriers. And I'll just say that I found them in December when I was, or maybe November, when I was just Googling and just came across, this mental health support for people of color. And I wanted to know more, and I thought I imagine the rest of the community would also. And so it's been several months in the coordinating and finding the right date, and but it's a real pleasure to have you all here and to have all of those who have joined us. So it is all yours.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm going to go ahead and start to share the screen. Okay. So we are happy to be joining you all today. We're going to be talking about what it means to live in a multiply wounded country and ways we can foster and facilitate resiliency through different strategies that we'll introduce and through our conversations as well. So like most of our presentations, we like to start off with a land acknowledgement. In this land acknowledgement, I will be saying the original names of the CommUnity tribe and whatnot, just to honor their names and how they prefer to refer to themselves. And so I'm just going to go ahead and begin reading. If y'all would like to go ahead and read with me, I am on San Diego territory, so I will be reading through that lens. Hauka. This is the greeting of the Ipai territory, otherwise known as the CommUnity. We would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land. We acknowledge San Diego County resides largely on Ipai territory, but also want to recognize the other communities that are here. The Payam Kawisham, Kupangash Wisham, and Ivilio Kwalatem. They have lived in this region for millennia, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live and work in these homelands. And I'm sure if y'all are coming from different areas across the United States, this is a great website to learn more about whose land you're on. They might not have the original names, but it's still great information to check out if you wanted to.
Thank you for that, Isabella. And yes, so we are coming from a program that is under Jewish Family Service San Diego. And Jewish Family Service is a large organization here in San Diego County that has been around since 1918, actually, so over 100 years, and has a multitude of different services for the community, such as refugee resettlement, nutrition programs, older adult programs, and much more. And our program specifically is also funded by the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency. And that's what just helps us kind of do the work that we do all throughout the county. And breaking down barriers, the program that we're coming from is it's largely an outreach and educational program where we, this group of beautiful people and myself work within our communities and where they intersect, of course, to have conversations on mental health, right? Reducing the stigma, or the goal is to reduce the stigma of mental health within our communities and speak with the providers that serve them so that they may know how to serve community in a good way in the ways that are needed, as well as providing mental health resources. We are strictly an educational program, so we do not provide diagnoses or serve as licensed therapists, but really we're just coming here as community members with the shared goal of talking about mental health.
These are some overall learning objectives that we hope that you take with you from today's presentations. So we're going to be learning more deeply about historical and intergenerational trauma and the ways they can affect our communities today. We will understand this through resilience and culture. So the point of our program is to center culture. We do that through the lens of cultural humility and the idea that culture is something that is ongoing and it's continuously changing, and we recognize that. And then lastly, we're going to be exploring our own personal connections to our lineage and the ways that we can promote resiliency through our own lived experiences. And then just some general community guidelines, since we are going to have a few discussion questions with you all today. So we hope that you can participate by sharing your own opinions and experiences by stating I statements, listening to and considering the opinions of others. We are drawing from our personal experiences. Of course, if you are comfortable with sharing that, I'm aware that we are on a live. We also will build on each other's comments to work towards a shared understanding, and observing and recognizing our own privileges and the ways that we all have bias. And lastly, some of the topics are difficult. There will be mention of suicide in our presentation. So if you need to step away, please do so. We want you to prioritize in taking care of yourself.
All right, so what we'd like to do, or just kind of a little heads up, if you'd feel free to ask questions, provide comments, right? We want to have a dialogue here, and we're all learning from one another, right? So please feel free to utilize the chat function and your microphone when you'd like. And something that we'd like to get into is this question here. So this, I think it's a good kind of, it relates, I would say, to our land acknowledgement, of course, right? But we wanted to ask you all, what is your relationship to the land that you're on? I recognize we're all coming from different parts of the country. So that's really cool. It's something that we don't really get to do very often, is, engage with folks that are at different parts of the country. But what is your relationship to the land that you're on, and how did you arrive? Or how did you come to be in this location that you are in? What is your connection to it?
This is your invitation to unmute and participate. And I'll say I followed family members who came to San Diego and ended up here.
Thank you for that, Francis. And I see in the chat real quick, and then and Martin, I see your hand raised up. From Melissa, I am a guest as I moved here from Missouri a few years ago. Beautiful in the chat also, Sergio, because of Mexico. Thank you, Sergio. And then Martin, feel free to share as well.
I think that living in the United States, to understand racial capitalism, we have to understand what's in the DNA of this country, that the abuse, the trauma the hurt, the pain, the theft, the tearing apart of families, of cultures, the disenfranchisement has such long roots that unless we acknowledge it and continue to keep it in our forefront, we fail to understand where we are and where we live, and by whose grace we walk these lands. That's where healing starts.
Thank you for sharing that, Martin. Yeah, I think you know, the intention, right, with sharing this question and hopefully, you know, having folks share is when we kind of first started thinking about this topic, right? All of us are coming from very diverse, very distinct communities. And we thought, okay, what's one thing that we can, I guess the way that I connected to it is, where am I drawing this resiliency from that I, you know, experienced to help me get through moving through this world. And I often think of obviously my ancestors, the folks that traveled and worked and, you know, did many things to get me essentially to be here, right, in this space of privilege for many, you know, in my family, to be born on this side of the border and stuff. So I think of this question, you know, I think of this a lot, like just why am I here? How am I here? How did I get here? And you know, all the folks that you know, brought me here, basically. And I see in the chat, sorry, it's
Let me, if I can share, it was fascinating that I was talking to my aunt. She's the eldest. She passed away several years ago. But it was a decision that my grandparents were going to go to France, but they couldn't do the paperwork in time. So they ended up going north, and they ended up in San Francisco, where my uncle was born. Then they went down to Los Angeles, where my aunt was born. Then they came down to a small town called Calexico. That's where I was born and raised. But it's all because of the revolution of 1910 that my grandfather had a Leyva hacienda. And I find it fascinating that if you really look into your background, if you really ask around, a lot of us, because of global situations like Ukrainians, so innocent, the Ukrainians, they're now here, and they're most likely their children are going to be raised here. That's a new generation. But immigration, you know, for its events, turn of situations. I love living history when somebody shares with me, you know, as you're saying, how did we get here?
Thank you, Sergio. I'm gonna go ahead and read a couple of more comments from the chat. I really appreciate this. Thank you all for sharing. So we have Nori Halka. I'm a geologist, so the land, the soil, the water, the rocks are part of my soul. I escaped from winter in DC to San Diego. Thank you. We have Eric. My oldest known ancestor was a first European person born in New Netherlands in 1624. My DNA test still says I'm 100% European. I moved to San Diego 8 years ago because I didn't have any living relatives left on the East Coast. Thank you, Eric, for sharing. Yeah, so all these, you know, different stories, right? There's many different paths and journeys and steps and people and experiences, challenges that were experienced, right? To just have us all be wherever we're at in this moment. And yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more and how all this kind of connects to this conversation. So considering all these different things, right? Consider the journey that brought us all here today. I think it's an important part to kind of think of resiliency, to think of our connections to those who have come before us and those who will be coming ahead in times ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing all of the ways that you came here to where you are now. we're now going to transition into talking a little bit more about historical and intergenerational trauma, kind of front loading what this means in the context of national trauma. So starting off with historical trauma, this is otherwise known as the emotional wound. Since y'all are in this work, we know that historical trauma is not a singular event. It is a structure. It is things that we experience as a result of the systems that are in place that lead us to experience trauma through structures such as colonization, enslavement, war, genocide that lead us to experiences such as losing our own culture, losing our own ties to our historical background, and can also implicate the ways we cope with these sorts of traumas. So that is kind of what historical trauma is. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about intergenerational trauma and how that kind of ties in with each other.
Yes. So with intergenerational trauma, right, we kind of obviously historical trauma and intergenerational trauma, we think of those two things. And intergenerational trauma really affects, right, obviously it impacts one family, right? So each generation of this family is going to be experiencing or may experience their own form of trauma, their own kind of lived experience of the challenges that can be traced back for decades. And oftentimes we see that this kind of unhealed or untreated trauma in a parent is transmitted through the child, through an attachment bond, and through messaging about the self and the world. And I feel that many folks can oftentimes think of, well, that's not, how can something that happened to this person impact you today? By these things, right? By the different dynamics that we have in a family after, a trauma occurs, or by the way that we connect to our culture, or just learn different messaging of who we are, basically, or told who we are in our place in society. So it's very much real, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more. So we wanted to include this quote from Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, who is a Native American social worker and associate professor, who is best known for developing a model of historical trauma for the Lakota people. And so in regards to intergenerational trauma, a cumulative of emotional and physical and psychological wounding over one's lifetime, and transfers generation to generation following loss of lives, land, and vital aspects of culture.
And then I also wanted to share another quote with y'all just to kind of help visualize what trauma means and what it can look like through Resmaa Menakem, who describes it so well in terms of what it means to have unhealed trauma in the midst of the ongoing legacies of what these structures have done to our generations. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and y'all can read it along with me and kind of process what they're saying. So unhealed trauma acts like a rock thrown into a pond. It causes ripples that move outward, affecting many other bodies over time. After months or years, unhealed trauma can appear to become part of someone's personality. Over even longer periods of time, as it is passed on and gets compounded through other bodies in a household, it can become a family norm. And if it gets transmitted and compounded through multiple families and generations, it can start to look like culture. But it isn't culture, it's traumatic retention that has lost its context over time, though without context, it has not lost its power. And that's kind of what we're doing today, is kind of centering our lived experiences in order to sort of talk about what resiliency looks like, not in the lens where resiliency has been thought of something as negative, that there's nothing to bounce back to, but in fact, drawing from our own personal experiences through this presentation, hopefully. And then we wanted to go around maybe to share a little bit about this question. Y'all are free to just process it or talk amongst in the chat or unmute yourself. And the question is, how might national trauma impact an individual / family? You're free to talk about your personal experiences. You can talk about different examples as well. And we'll open this up to you all.
Well, I have a question then. Sometimes from what I've heard and what I've seen and what I've witnessed or have read, trauma seems like a negative, or for example, as a prisoner of war, I forgot the name of it, but there's people when they were released, World War II, Vietnam, they had a whole different perspective on life. All of a sudden, they said, I gone through the worst of hell. Anything cannot get even worse. So therefore, their attitude was just appreciation, admiration, and just inspiration for the future. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because sometimes crises is an opportunity to change your life. You know, I personally have my issues, but I stepped back and I said, you know, there's going to be an explanation when you turn around, and I'm for my age, you know, for my call the yardstick. Now I have this experience. I turned around and I said, now I get it. Now I understand it. I see the full circle. It's something highly personal, but I feel complete that the trauma that I went through, divorce in the family, a death in the family, etc., is something that life just needs to be experienced. And unfortunately, not all trauma is fair. Do I make sense?
Yeah, that makes very much sense. And you bring in this powerful idea of how can, like the idea and that sense of radical hope through our experiences and our traumas. And you put it so well put. And I think, yes, trauma is not fair in all contexts, but then there's also trauma as a collective where we can grow and kind of cope in ways that help our communities. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, really quick, a good example that I tell my kids, don't be a victim. Whatever life hits you, don't be a victim. Take responsibility and go forward.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Sergio. Appreciate it. Would anyone else like to share about this question?
Fernando, ¿quieres decir algo sobre trauma nacional y impacto sobre la familia? Yo te traduzco si quieres.
Bueno.
O con el inglés que
Yeah,
te
I
guste,
tried to
como guste.
I tried to unmute you right when you unmuted, Fernando. There you go. And then I see Eric's hand after that.
Okay, I'm gonna try speak English. Hi, everybody. Well, about the trauma, well, the trauma is in different areas. The traumas, Isabel explained about what happened in the family when one person happened. In my experience, in my personal story, when my son died 20 years ago, the trauma is not only for him, wife, or mother, or me. The trauma is for the family and for the community. The traumas is coming and destroying the life, destruyen las vidas, no nada más de la familia, sino de la comunidad y de todo el entorno de una persona que tiene una tragedia.
So when there's a tragedy, that it's not just a family tragedy, but it's a community tragedy that surrounds it.
Aquí lo importante, I think so, the more important is, what are you doing when the impact, when you enter in the trauma, for, in my case, for the loss, the member in your family? What are you doing? Or when the police attack, or police hit you, or have a violence against you, what are you gonna do? I know a lot of people respond with violence. This one is the natural attitude to the people. The violence me, I violence you. And this one is the big mistake in the society. Creo, y esto es difícil de entender, y I'm sorry, es que estoy hablando en español, no encuentro palabras en inglés. Que cuando uno sufre un impacto que le genera a uno un trauma, ese trauma cambia la vida de uno.
When you
Desgraciadamente,
suffer a trauma, it changes your life.
y desgraciadamente mucha gente dentro de esos traumas van a un extremo, violencia o autoviolencia.
So unfortunately, what happens is that many people turn that trauma into violence against others or violence against oneself.
Por eso tenemos unas tasas de suicidio muy alta en las fuerzas militares por los traumas postraumáticos después de que los muchachos van a la guerra.
That's why we see such a high level of suicide among the US military for people who have gone to war and suffered that trauma.
Yo, el trauma, pues creo que lo convertí en una forma de vida. Yo todavía estoy traumado hasta la fecha, 20 años y todavía estoy traumado.
20 years later, I'm still traumatized, but I have changed my life as a result of that trauma and turned it into something good and wholesome.
No hay cura para un trauma. Hay maneras de llevar el trauma. Eso es lo importante, tener herramientas para vivir con un trauma grande dentro de un contexto familiar.
There's not a way to cure that trauma, but there is a way to live through that trauma.
Mi herramienta fue el amor. Mi herramienta ha sido el trabajo con jóvenes para que no entren en la violencia de un militarismo o de una pandilla.
My weapon has been love and to work with young people to encourage them not to go to war or to take out their trauma in terms of gangs or other kinds of violence.
Y cuando veo personas así como Isabel y los miembros de esta acción, me da mucho gusto y siento que hay esperanza para todas aquellas personas que llegan a sufrir un trauma.
So when I see all of you, it fills me with hope that we can grow from this trauma.
Y más importante, que no somos nosotros los viejitos los que lo estamos haciendo, sino son ustedes los jóvenes que están llevándonos a una vida mejor. Gracias.
And it is not us elders that are doing it, but we are uplifted by the young people here carrying that torch forward.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Fernando. You bring in such an important point in terms of how we deal with trauma and the trauma responses as a result of these structures that are in place and that are ongoing, that continue to harm us, and how being in community like we are today can kind of promote that sense of resilience or that sense of care and hope. So thank you so much for sharing.
I had seen Eric, Eric, yeah.
Hi, yeah, this is not sure exactly how much I want to disclose exactly, but my father died about 3 weeks before the Iraq War started. And I was he had Parkinson's disease for 8 years before that, and we were caring for him. And meanwhile, I was having my own mental health struggles, and it was all kinds of crazy times. And honestly, I was just telling somebody I didn't even realize we invaded Iraq like for like maybe a month out and later. I wasn't really able to engage, but yeah, so all those times, like probably from the late 90s until about 2008, I was having panic attacks. I had a lot going on, which don't really want to disclose everything, but I was having panic attacks everything every day. I mean, sometimes they would last a week. And but and then somebody asked me like years later, how did you stop doing that? I said I had some kind of spiritual experience, and it definitely had something to do with the fact that we were getting a new president. We were getting rid of the old president at the time. And so right around 2008, and I remember like when, I think it was either election night or after the election results were announced, I was like, I was doing some heavy spiritual therapeutic things, like driving around to places where certain things would happen, and kind of letting it go. And it absolutely had to do with what was going on in the national scene. So that was just my experience, so I hope that made sense to somebody. I hope it helped somebody. I think I like to be quiet now.
Thank you, Eric. I'll share something you said, kind of reminded me of the impact that I said that Donald Trump had on me and him becoming president. I think I don't think I was alone amongst people who were deeply troubled by his election and had significant mental impacts just on that. Personally, I, as an organizer who often feels like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders and feels like I need to do, I need to help save the world. At that time, I was feeling a lot of anxiety and went to the doctor, and my doctor actually straight up said, well, you can't let Donald Trump win, right? So what are we going to do? It was that time I ended up choosing to go use an anti-anxiety medication. Didn't ever think I would be the kind of person to rely on pharmaceuticals. And I think there's it's an interesting conversation for everyone to, have for themselves and explore. But I would say for myself, it did bring me from a place of feeling incredibly overwhelmed to a place of a manageable level of anxiety that made it so I could then continue to do the work and approach the work with a little more calmness. And in retrospect, I don't know how, it would have, said there's other things we can add on like meditation and things, but it was really important, I think, tool. And so I think, thinking about how national trauma can impact an individual, I mean, it can, I think, really, really challenge our feelings of security and of just, I think, our own capacity to control what's going on. I think that's a big part of it. I think it's obviously when we feel like we have no control over these things, it becomes harder to deal with. So I'll just leave it there and share those thoughts.
Thank you so much for sharing. Appreciate it.
Can I just bring another issue? You said the national issue versus the local, something that you can identify on a national level. That sometimes we feel so powerless, very powerless. I'll give an example. On a national, I'm on permanent disability. I worked for the sheriff department 20 years. Make a long story short, my surgery went really bad. So I'm on opioids for 15 years. And so when you had the opioid crisis, I was collateral damage. All of a sudden, workman's comp just dropped my opioids, no refills. And I went through a serious withdrawal of a couple of months of not sleeping, for example, 4 nights consecutively. Make a long story short, my doctor, when I called 911 for me. Instead of having the ambulance arrive, it was the deputies. I work for the sheriff. Now, they didn't put me in handcuffs because they saw my ID. And so when I got to the hospital, the doctor says, "Oh my God, you're not in handcuffs." Because when you're suicidal, because I was seriously having withdrawals with no therapy, no medical intervention, nothing. They just cut my opioids of Norco and Oxycontin of 15 years. And then when it was all done and over, I had a terrible experience with the sheriff department in itself. So what happens is that when it was all done and over, I felt so powerless, very powerless, because there's nothing I can do with the system. And then I told myself, wow, that was a life experience. And I really registered how people can talk about it. And it's more than the trauma of the experience, but it's the trauma of saying, you're just one voice. You're just one individual. You're just dismissed as again, it's a national issue and I'm just one person. That in itself is a trauma of saying, how is it that I can make a change? Because you feel so powerless when it comes, especially on a national issue. I have written to all my representatives from city all to, and it's called the silent denial. They don't respond. That is a lot of power when they don't respond. So that's just my intake. That's an experience I went through.
Thank you for sharing that. You bring in the idea of how individualistic our society is in the ways that our society can ignore our needs as a community and our personal needs in the ways that we experience our own traumas. So I appreciate you for sharing again. Any other thoughts on this question before we move on? And then y'all are more than welcome to continue engaging with this question. We're just going to go ahead and move on to our brief just like a quick check-in with you all.
Yes, thank you all for sharing. So I know a few of those things can kind of be a little bit heavy to think about, to reflect on, right? So we wanted to just provide a little of, a few moments for all of us to kind of check in with ourselves. How's your head? How's your heart, right? Thinking of those two things, recognizing that our wellness, our well-being is connected to so many things, right? Our emotional space, our mental and physical space. So just checking in. And this can be kind of an answer you can answer in your head to yourself, or if you'd like to check in the chat and share with all of us, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to share a small exercise that we can do. It's called the triple warmer smoothie. This was introduced to me actually by Isabella, introduced it to the team as a really, I think, a nice exercise that we can do to kind of ground ourselves in the spaces that we're in. And the intent to share something like this, you might think it's simple, but it's really, I think that's encouraging to have something that we could do for a minute in our days when we're feeling overwhelmed or just exhausted. What a great, thing to think about. Hey, I can do something that can just be a minute and it can make a really big difference in my day. So I'm going to ask us all to kind of just take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. So feeling our body a little bit, we can roll our shoulders. We can sit in a way that just feels comfortable in whatever seat that we're sitting in, our chairs, our couches, or beds, or wherever we might be. If we could be standing up, but just kind of moving our body a little bit. And so what we're going to do with the triple warmer smoothie, it's going to kind of focus on 3 kind of spots on our kind of upper body. And the first one is our temples. So we can place our fingertips at our temples and we can kind of just gently move those in a circular motion. Just apply the pressure that feels good and breathe in a rate that feels comfortable. In through our nose, out through our mouth. And we're going to trace our fingers back to the back of our head. And wherever that feels good in the back of your head, you're just kind of going to continue those circular movements, Breathing in through your nose. Breathing out. And then we're going to follow our fingertips down to the back of our neck. This is our 3rd point in the triple warmer smoothie. Just going to continue to kind of draw circles around in our neck. Breathing in, breathing out. And can bring our arms, our hands across our chest. Just give ourselves a squeeze. So something simple, something short that kind of helps us bring ourselves back into our bodies in a way that feels hopefully safe and good to us. Just giving ourselves some moments to breathe. And it can be done for however long or for however short you need. It's basically like a little mini massage, I would say, but it makes a big difference. I don't know, I feel so much better. So hopefully you all enjoyed that and can put it in your little toolkit for some somatic exercises or grounding exercises for your days.
And then, yeah, thank you everyone for participating. I love the triple warmer smoothie. It's otherwise known as a somatic exercise. So if you're someone who prefers physical or like physical activities or physical ways of healing or processing your emotions, that's a great strategy that I like to share. And it releases different tension points in our bodies where we feel the most tense when we are anxious or stressed out. Thank you, Bree, for leading us through that. And thank you, everyone, for participating once again. Right now, I'm going to be talking you all through the ways that historical and intergenerational trauma can impact us collectively as a community. So it often starts with a dominant group. It can be anyone who holds any sort of power over another, and it can be anyone of any population. And the type of harm that is often inflicted is structural, as I previously mentioned. And it can lead to loss of safety. And some of the examples that we included in here include displacement. We noticed that here, I'm in San Diego County, so I noticed that here the most where we see a lot of migrants and refugees entering as a result of the traumas they experienced with the US being in their own homelands. We see violence or acute or chronic, economic destruction, loss of resources. There's that sense of cultural loss, culture, language. There's been bills that have been passed to prevent schools from teaching students home languages, which has caused a lot of pain for our young ones. And then these are some of the ways that communities have processed, and we will talk a little bit more about trauma responses, but these are just to name a few. They can include post-traumatic stress disorder, lack of boundaries, maybe low sense of self-esteem. We might see anxiety, difficulty with emotional regulation. There can be that sense of suppressing emotions. And we also have depression. And again, these are just to name a few. And then now onto sort of this more scientific or chemical-based perspective on intergenerational trauma. This is called epigenetics, and epigenetics is a study of how behaviors and the environment can cause any sort of changes within our own DNA and how they can be passed down. So it's kind of like the image that I showed you prior, but now it's looking at how the DNA is affected and how it can be passed down. So we have some examples of that through these three individuals and their legacies through their young ones. And an example that I can provide is that I'm originally from the Philippines. So this is just to kind of give you all like an illustration of what that might look like. And at the time of when my parents was living there, there was this martial law was enacted. So there was that force of silence amongst my community. And then a couple of years later, it was repealed. And then it was again announced recently, last 2 years ago. And the way epigenetics has affected me is that trauma is pre-verbal. Trauma is something that our bodies notice before we can even articulate it through words. So the fear that my family has experienced as a result of martial law being announced was the same sense of fear I felt when I heard it re-announced. Like I wasn't sure why until I heard of the term epigenetics and how trauma is something that our bodies notice before we can. So that's kind of just to show what epigenetics means and how it can leave a chemical mark in our bodies and our coping and stress responses to different situations that our elders have experienced, our ancestors have experienced, and the ways we re-experience that as a result of it not being addressed.
Yeah, so now we're going to share a couple of common trauma responses, and also kind of we'll be speaking on recognizing our own responses to trauma. It could be helpful to kind of recognize, like Isabella mentioned, it's often pre-verbal. I really like that term. It's new to me, right? Oftentimes our bodies experience these things first, right? And so what we're hoping to do, right, is to strengthen the mind-body connection, right? So we kind of are mindful and aware of when our bodies react a certain way. It kind of already tells, okay, my body's feeling this way. How, what does this mean for me? And just kind of recognizing our responses can help us see the ways that can support us the most in that time, right? So finding these coping mechanisms or different tools and just different knowings that we know and have been taught or learned from our loved ones of how to take care of ourselves. So we're going to talk about a few trauma responses before then. And a little to kind of, I think this might feel like a little bit of a summary, but some impacts or lasting effects that we can experience as a result of the traumas that we might experience culturally and the traumas that we may experience through intergenerationally through our loved ones are the following, or some, some examples. And the first one is being the parent-child relationship, right? Oftentimes parents who experience a trauma may have because they themselves are human and trying to cope with this challenge, can oftentimes have a difficult time establishing a secure or a safe connection or attachment to their children, right? And so this is when, children learn from their parents, right? So that can be passed on. Oftentimes what we see in our parents, the way that they react to something that's not ideal, we often learn from them, right? So we see our parents react, then we learn that same kind of reaction or processing for certain things. So it can definitely impact that relationship. Just so I can provide like also personal kind of context, for myself and my family, something that I've observed is the difficulty for parents oftentimes to express love or to their children. So my grandfather lost his father very young, and he dealt with alcoholism throughout his entire life, among other things. And that trauma that my grandfather experienced through the loss of his own father and many other things, he didn't really have the ability to share love or express love to my father in a way that made my father feel safe in the home and loved in the home. And so these kinds of things, right, we can see in that image that Isabella just previously mentioned as intergenerational trauma. And so this kind of unhealed trauma or challenges in the family can continue to move forward with the youth, with the children that are born, until someone may kind of recognize it and do something about it or heal that trauma and create a new type of dynamic or relationship between parent and child. And then something kind of related to that is the culture of silence. Children learn that silence can oftentimes keep their family members safe and learn to suppress their own feelings to keep safe. And so I think I really see this, we may really see this when families are separated as a result of trauma, and youth are oftentimes, in order to, in their minds, to keep their families together, they suppress their own emotions and learn to not talk about what's maybe going on in the home and not seek support for fear of the separation of their family. So creating a culture of silence. There's also that biological aspect that Isabella was mentioning with the epigenetics, right? Research has shown that epigenetic modifications to DNA or to the expression of DNA play a role in our well-being. Excuse me. And then with our future generations, right, exposure to trauma can form a passageway to future generations having an increased risk of negative mental health symptoms or experiences. But we know that, trauma can be passed down, so can healing, right? We don't just inherit, we don't just inherit all this trauma from our loved ones, from our ancestors, right? We also inherit a lot of resiliency, a lot of joy, a lot of different knowledge and wisdoms from them. So it's just oftentimes what it takes is someone in that cycle, that lineage, to kind of acknowledge those things that are also present, right? Those wisdoms, those knowings, those teachings, etc.
And then these are just some more to name a few. There are a couple more that are within these own trauma responses. So the first one being is freeze. Some of y'all might have heard of this already, but freeze is feeling stuck, feeling immobilized or spacing out, disassociating in the moment of when we are experiencing some sort of stress, trauma, or anxiety. There can also be that response of fight where folks might be more irritable, frustrated. They might become more aggressive towards those that are around them. We also have flight, in which a person might separate themselves within the situation due to anxiety and fear. There's that avoiding chronic worry and that sense of perfectionism. And fawn, this is the most common, I would say, in Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, where we might see more people pleasing, where we might see people who might avoid conflict as a result of keeping themselves protected in order to survive in this society. There's also that lack of boundary, and saying no might be a little bit more difficult as well. And then with that, I know that these are just a few. We wanted you all to sort of engage with this question as well, so we can bring more into the table that are not mentioned. And we wanted to know if there are other responses that have not been mentioned, they don't have to be just these. But yeah, we just wanted to know like what you've seen in community, how does it show up? And if there's any others you would like to mention.
Never thought of perfectionism as a trauma response, and that's making me think. Unpack that.
Yeah, one thing I heard that really shifted my mindset on perfectionism was that perfectionism was a tool of white supremacy, and that really like shifted everything for me. I'm like, okay, that's a lot, especially like with the model minority myth. It's a lot to process. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts on this? Right. We are more than welcome to continue responding to these in the chat if you would like to. We're just going to go ahead and move forward and now talk a little bit about resiliency. So we've talked about trauma and defining it a little bit and what these trauma responses look like. We kind of want to dive into resiliency now too.
Just again, as a reminder, with very nice image, if trauma can be passed down through generations, so can healing, right? A lot of our loved ones who journeyed and took many different roads and paths and experiences to get us to here, to where we are today. Goodness, I just totally spaced. Goodness. I guess just wanted to say it just takes one of us in our lineage to kind of make the change. Oh, here's what I wanted to say. Well, for many of us, our loved ones had to experience many different challenges and traumas throughout their lives. And we're on the mode of surviving, right? They had to survive. They just had to survive all these different traumas that they experienced. And for younger generations, now they have the opportunity perhaps to thrive. Right, there's wanting to focus on our mental health, recognizing, yes, these things happened to us and these things happened and occurred, and you know, how can I take care of myself and honor my loved ones before me, right? By healing and by hopefully bringing more healing to my loved ones and the younger generations that come after me. So yeah, it's not just trauma, right, that we inherit from our loved ones. We also inherit a lot of healing as well.
So what does it mean to be resilient? I think there's a lot of negative connotations when we hear the word resiliency, as it can be kind of a way to minimize the experiences that we have with ongoing structures that continue to marginalize people and communities. But the way that we see resiliency, at least with our team, is we look at it through the sense of cultural humility and ways we can incorporate our culture, our lived experiences. So we operate in a way where it's sort of strength-based. We bring in our collective identities and we bring in the practice of collectivism, where our society has kind of not been so inclusive to that. So our ways of understanding resilience is to maintain our culture, whether that culture is something that we inherited or something that we developed amongst our groups of friends, our families, in the face of traumatic history. So it's kind of that sense of reclaiming and creating our own thing, our own ideas of what wellness and resiliency look like amidst a society that kind of doesn't want us to survive. And then that brings me into talking about the history of self-care and community care, because we do talk a lot about that within our team and across San Diego County. We want to pay homage to the folks who started and talked about self-care in the ways that we know it now. And we're going to talk about this through this timeline. It's a brief timeline. Of course, there's a lot more, but we wanted to just touch points on a few. So I'm just going to start from the left-hand side, and then I'll move forward to 2019. So with the history of self-care and community care, there may not have been language for it, but it's something that has been practiced since the pre-colonial age. There's been collective practices within Indigenous communities across the globe. And oftentimes that self-care is rooted within the lands that they are on, the ways that they can heal in collaboration with each other. It was a mutual understanding between the people and the land, the ways they give back and the ways they take. And then in the 1950s and 1960s, this is where we begin to see the institutionalization of people with mental illnesses and disabilities. There's been this emergence of medical recommendations to folks who had repeated exposure to trauma, pain, or had mental health challenges. And that's where we see those infrastructures coming into place. And then to kind of retaliate against that institutionalization and other structures that are in place, in the 1970s, the Black Panther Party popularized self-care as an act of resistance and staying resilient amid systemic racism and violence. We see a lot of free health clinics as a result of their work, and we see them today. And then in 2019, self-care has been commodified into an $11 billion industry from what it once was. So it has definitely shifted and transformed over time. And we recognize that self-care strategies are not exclusive to the ways we purchase things, but they're something that is more personal to us in our own healing journey.
Thank you, Isa, for that. Right, so like Isabella was mentioning, right, reclaiming and creating our own practices for wellness and resiliency are some of the things that we hope to kind of dive into, to talk about, to really reflect upon in our days, right? So kind of a few questions to kind of get y'all thinking about these things as well. If you don't already think about these things, I feel like we all might at some capacity have thought about these things in the past. But first question, right, is, are there any wellness practices from your culture that you learned growing up? Anything that you were taught, or, you know, without really trying to get that information, and other practices that you noticed in your culture that you really kind of had to ask about and learn a little bit more about on your own? If, you know, we just kind of want to think about them to ourselves, definitely feel free to do so, or also share with the group.
Well, what happened to me is when I was 14 years old, my parents divorced, and my mother was a chronic alcoholic. And I remember her hanging up the phone and then just throwing the phone against the wall, coming out, yelling and screaming. And it was me and my two younger siblings. And she says in Spanish, you know, lárganse, tu papá va a venir para llevaros, saying that, you know, leave, your father's going to come by, he's going to take you. So pack your bags and take off. Well, my mother, being a chronic alcoholic, was under the influence. My youngest sister ran to the room. My brother started crying. I had to escort him to his room. And then I just confronted my mom. I just looked at her and she knew the shame of what she did. You know, I was 14 years old. Make a long story short, I went out to the patio and I told myself, is this what I have to look for life? Is this what life is going to be for me? Is this what life is offering me? Is this something? And I said, is it just nothing but problems? Well, when I said the word problem, immediately the word solution appeared. And every time I try to say the word problem in my argument, the word solution just kept on like sticky paper on my hand. It wouldn't let go. So at 14, going through a trauma, I learned that to every problem, there's a solution, even if it means death. In other words, when I die, I want to die with a smile, regardless. So what I'm trying to say is that my mantra is life is hilariously funny. Earth, on the other hand, is deadly serious. What I'm trying to say is that each and every one of us should have a mantra of a saying that it's just your epitaph. I mean, when people are going to look at your epitaph, what is it going to say? I mean, what is your whole outlook in life? I want to die with a smile. So that's my wellness.
Thank you for sharing, Sergio. Thank you.
Makes me think of a phrase that comes from Thailand that I just found in a guidebook once, but I adopted and tattooed it on myself. The word is sanuk, and it's the Thai word for fun, but more so overall sense of enjoyment of life. And basically the theory that you should only do that which you enjoy, and anything that you have to do, you should find a way to make it enjoyable. So it's sort of that dual concept that I like, and trying to get through that. And on the issues of wellness, I mean, I'll note that my father came from Pakistan. My mother was born and raised in Peru, in Lima. And my brother and I were born and raised in Chicago. My Pakistani uncle ended up buying a German homeopathic pharmacy, and he was a homeopathic pharmacist. So I did actually get to grow up with homeopathy, and sort of recognizing that there's a whole lot of different modalities and types of healing and wellness. And now I've gotten to know more about both Asian and Chinese medicine and acupuncture and massage and all of the different forms. And I think one thing that I'll mention that a consciousness from that is that my uncle's shop in Chicago actually imports a lot of products from Europe, where there's not chemicals, just bath and body products that don't have chemicals in it that America allows and other countries allow, that are actually having negative impacts on your bodies, such as like deodorant with aluminum in it. And so kind of recognizing, being grateful, I guess, to my ancestors who have given me this sort of bigger awareness to think outside just the mainstream, what we're marketed.
Thank you for sharing, Francis. What a blessing. That's amazing to be kind of grow up having those knowledge, like that knowledge, and those teachings from so many places, right, that are oftentimes, I would say, not like really validated in kind of like a Western world. I feel like to bring a point that you had also mentioned, Francis, earlier about medication, right? Oftentimes in the society that we live in now, what we're taught when it comes to like taking care of ourselves, and Isabella also mentioned this briefly, right, in the timeline, the self-care industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? People are taught that you have to spend this amount of money to be well. You have to pay this amount of money to go to this meditation retreat, to go to this yoga retreat, to, do all these things. That for many of our communities makes us feel like immobile. What can we do to take care of ourselves? I don't have these means that that society is telling me I need to take care of myself, when, there's a wealth of knowledge that comes from many of our cultures that is oftentimes not validated, but is absolutely valid and absolutely essential for many of us in our own wellness kind of practices and journeys, right? Is the remembering, for many people, the remembering of knowledge from our loved ones and things that we learn from others, right? We have from other cultures, and that really resonate with us. So I appreciate that sharing, and yeah, a lot of things that we can learn from that, right? I do also want to mention there was one point, it's like complicated when you mentioned this, Francis. I really appreciated the fact that you did, is the and this might seem tangential, is the usage of medication sometimes in our own wellness journeys. You know, whatever journey some of us may take. I've also taken medication to kind of take care of myself in a time where I was feeling like I was drowning. It was like the peak of like COVID, of, you know, the change in administrations, just having anxiety all the time and having these panic attacks, hearing these things in the news. And so I was feeling very much like I was drowning the entire time. I didn't know what to do. I had, you know, my own cultural practices, but I just couldn't get to them. I couldn't access them. I didn't have this capacity in me until I kind of had my own journey to it, but recognizing I needed some support from medication. And I didn't ever think that I would, right? There's also this huge stigma with medication and you know, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. But having that in that time really helped me just kind of get my head above the water. And once I could get my head above the water, I was like, okay, great. Now I'm going to start being able to take my walks outside to connect to the land. Now I can connect with my family. I have the capacity to finally just be able to talk to them and ask my grandmother questions about, you know, X, Y, and Z, ask about my loved ones that have passed, do yoga, things that like really filled me up. That was a point where I could finally do those and finally supplement my life and my own, you know, well-being with those things that resonated more with me. And so I just share that also because it's a story that's not really, sometimes there's a lot of stigma against those things, right? We have to, but we're in a world now where we take what feels good and can, or, you know, we take what feels safe and healthy and all these things, and we just kind of adapt our own kind of wellness plan or routine. I don't know, it sounds very medicalized. I'm sorry if it does. I was pre-med for a while, and so I can't, that's in my brain still a little bit, but yeah, so, but I see, sorry, I want to make sure I get in the chat in case there's folks sharing on these questions.
Lift up Cha's voice from the chat. She just had to leave. An amazing organizer in our community, Cha Murdoch. And she wrote in the chat about that the trauma of the Filipino immigrants experience is so unimaginably traumatic and painful, and that members of Filipino Workers Center, where she's organizes with, they transform this trauma by joining organizations and by educating themselves and by fighting for their rights. And that is how they survive. So I thought that was really poignant and important to realize that that taking back power is part of that repair. And you may also realize that I think it's good to keep in mind that sometimes, you know, turning off the news is actually also a form of self-care. Times when informing ourselves is an important part, but there's also times where getting, you know, stepping back from all the podcasts all the time, which is something I also had to do, is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's it feels like a challenge sometimes, right, for folks that, you know, are with community or are, you know, trying to make these changes with, you know, on a larger scale. It can feel sometimes impossible, and goes back to the idea of like maintaining radical hope that Isabella mentioned, right? What are some ways that we can maintain radical hope and also kind of creating a balance in our lives? It's a multitude of things. And yeah, the news one is big. Sometimes it's like we just create little pockets of peace and breaks for ourselves in order to kind of keep going. And I just wanted to share this quote from Angela Davis as well, which is just a good reminder, right? Anyone who's interested in making a change in the world just also has to learn how to take care of herself, himself, themselves, right? We can't keep going if we're not taking care of ourselves. And so just a big reminder for that as well. Well, for anyone who would like to share, please feel free to continue doing so in the chat. I think we do have some time, hopefully, to do this kind of next closing activity. Like Isabella mentioned a few times, and while we've been talking, right, we approach a lot of this work that we do, especially breaking down barriers in the lens of like cultural humility. And so this activity we received, and we also were able to do through a training that we were a part of through work, and it's called the I Am poem. And when we did this for the first time, it was just really, for me, super transformative to just kind of reflect on these things. And really just obviously made me think of the journey that it took by all these people to bring me where I am today. And it reminded me of just the importance that I am to take care of myself, right? Just how important I am just to take care of myself. So I don't know if we will be able to do like breakout rooms. What do you think, Isabella? Oh, Francis, yes, gives a thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful because I'm not sure if we can share the screen on the in breakout rooms, but maybe we can stay here for a little bit and write down our thoughts about it, and then we can go into the breakout room if possible.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. So this is called an I Am poem, and this is created by George Ella Lyon. And so what we're going to do is just kind of reflect on our own things, right? We're going to, if you have a pen and paper, or you kind of just want to think about this, whatever feels best for you or easiest for you in this moment. And we're going to just take the time to kind of fill in these blanks here. So I am from blank. And on the bottom, you're going to see it's, a specific item from your childhood home that you can kind of think about and fill in that blank from, and we're going to continue that way. And so underneath the line is what we're going to fill in that blank space with. And in that breakout room, we can potentially share these poems that we create, right? So you want to take some time, if everyone wants to take some time to just kind of write these things down or take a snapshot with your phone, it might be a little bit easier to kind of fill in the blanks that way. You have a pen and paper and your phone next to you.
How big do you want the breakout groups to be?
Maybe in groups. I see we're about 14 folks. Maybe we can do groups of 4. We can have like 3, or I'm like trying to do math here. Like how many? Maybe groups of 4. So we have like maybe 3 groups. One of the groups is going to have maybe an extra person. So 5, 5, and 4 maybe. That seems maybe good. What do you think, Isabella?
Yeah, I think that's a good amount.
Thank you, Francis, for just kind of facilitating the breakout aspect.
And I just want folks to know one of the breakout rooms is going to remain here in the in this main room, therefore providing some sort of broadcast on the live stream. So if let me I am going to think this through real fast while you guys think all that.
Yeah. Whatever I can support with it, whatever we can support with too, Francis. Let us So I hope folks have been able to kind of write down a little bit, maybe make a template for yourself, whether that's with just a pen and paper or on the computer.
Okay, when you guys give the sign, be ready to assign.
Yeah, already.
Ready? Okay. So if it asks you to move to a room, go ahead and do that. There's some people who will not be asked to move to a room, and you should just remain where you are at. And oh, and how many minutes? We'll do this for, we have maybe 15 minutes. And then we can regroup and then close out after that.
That sounds great.
Sounds good.
Okay, and Isabella, I have you in this main space, so if you want to take the lead in here, that's cool.
Sounds good. We don't have to do the entire poem. Y'all can just do whatever point you left off on. I can kind of start us off. I didn't get through everything, but I can share a little bit of what I have, and y'all are more than welcome to join in and share your own poem. So I did this a while back. I couldn't find the one that I had, so I just restarted it. So I'm gonna go ahead and begin. So I am from my mother's cross-stitched tapestries, from red boots and tattered blankets. I am from the mountainous terrain where it always rains. I am from the tall pine trees whose branches shaded me. I am from wrapping lumpia with my family, from Nelia and Argus. I am from laughter and harmony, from always smiling and crying. I am from dinner prayers and walking in the rain. So that's where I left off on. And y'all are more than welcome to also share what you have. Thank you.
Eric or Milagro? Is it Mar? Eric, I saw you unmute.
I didn't do it.
Oh, I didn't.
I don't
Oh,
know.
you didn't do the poem yet?
No, why, I'm not planning to.
It's okay.
It feels a little off to me, and so
That's completely okay. Thank you for your presence. So
okay.
Thank you. Same. It felt I think it felt more by being to just hold space and listen. And I'm doing the poem, but it's more of like I want to keep it intimate. So I hope you can understand.
Yeah, even if
Yeah, of course.
I understand that. Even if I did, I wouldn't want to like. This is live and stuff, so
Mm-mm-mm.
that's an issue for me.
Certainly. And yeah, I kind of picked at random who stayed out here, and but also if anyone, of course, wants to move into a private room that's not broadcast, I can make that happen. But also I think this is a great tool for us to keep and use personally. So thank you for this tool.
Yeah, of course.
Because I was getting the things done, I didn't have time to really craft mine. I am willing to give a little extemporaneous attempt at this, if you will all bear with me. I am from couch forts with blankets and pillows, building a fun play place to be in. From watching too much television and big family dinners on Sundays. I am from the land under the loud airplanes. And forest preserves with roaming deer. I am from the green grass and lawns. Let's see, I am from the green grass whose roots cover fields and mountains. I am from rolling roti on the ground. From Hi and Ingrid. I am from singing Christmas carols around the grand piano and grilling anticuchos on the roof. From doing unto others as I would have them do unto me, and listening to my elders. I am from church basements and being forced to sing in choirs. I am from Chicago and the land of Gandhi, from ceviche and chicken tikka masala, from the mines of Peru and the street food carts of Pakistan, and from my grandmother who used to come to Chicago and visit for months and cook feasts from our kitchen floor, and from a single mother school teacher who raised 6 children. I am from those moments which I chose to show up in. I am from those moments which came before me. Whew, man, that's
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's a lot of vulnerability with this one. Definitely.
I realize there's a lot of sort of also thinking about like families' experiences and details from ancestors' lives and specific events in those ancestors' lives. And I think, you know, that could be especially challenging or make one realize how maybe they don't know a whole lot of
Mhm.
memories to choose from. It's been the weekend with my parents and my aunt and uncle, and there was family stories that we were talking about, and you know, I'm now, you know, even thinking about, you know, I am from severe diabetes and
Mm.
the loss of
Mm.
limbs to a illness, and we're definitely talking about some of those shared experiences and traumas
Mhm.
often tend to, because we tend to you know, that you guys talk about epigenetics, but also the genetics can lead to, you know, there's the shared challenges that come sometimes with that passed down through the blood as well.
Mhm. So true. So true.
I think the one question is how are the other groups doing? Are they all sitting
Yeah.
there like,
Mm.
whoa, yeah. And we can,
Not in a timer.
yeah, I know where we're at in time. Still about 6 minutes left. I'm just
Okay.
wondering if your groups are speaking longer than we are. And I do have the power to um hop into other rooms.
Chances are they'll need more time than us. But
It's possible, unless we're also hoping to save. How's about this? I'm gonna go ahead and assign Eric, I'm gonna you into room number 1 where you can just listen in to what's happening there, maybe. And then I'll send, actually Eric and I'll go to room 1 and send the other you two to room 2. And the Facebook live stream will just be playing for just a few minutes while we spend those last 5 minutes there, and then we'll come back together. Sound good?
Good.
Sounds good.
you're in charge.
All right. Love the power. Oops.
I've been muted this entire time and I've been talking to myself. Wow, I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you, Nori. Have a great day. Or night, thank you. It's night already for many of us. It seems like for all of us, I would say. But guess we're just waiting for the rest of the folks to join us in this main room. And I don't know, Miss Imani and Sergio, if y'all would like to share your mantras when that time comes. Yeah. I see a thumbs up, thank you. This is helpful because I was actually going to ask Miss Imani, like I'd love to like just kind of remember that mantra for myself. I loved it. It was like a quick and easy way to would maybe be a good way to start your day. Another one that I actually really like to do, like I mentioned, mindfulness was a big thing for me, or has been a big thing for me, and following the practices of Thich Nhat Hanh. There's a kind of a small little mantra that I used to share, waking up, and I can share that in the chat for folks who are interested in that. I see folks joined back into the main room.
Thich Nhat Hanh is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Was a beautiful member of San Diego County.
Yes, for those of us that are in San Diego County, there is a monastery here in Escondido in North County called Deer Park Monastery, which for me has been a beautiful place to be able to kind of go to, where they are practitioners of Buddhism practice, and it's an amazing place for those who find themselves in San Diego. And so I'm not,
Yeah,
Francis.
I think everyone is back.
Beautiful. So Isa.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, I know for many folks, maybe these poems are pretty personal. I know where it's recorded and being live streamed, so maybe keeping that to yourself and kind of thinking about that and just reading that to yourself later might be best. But in our breakout room, I know folks had kind of some cool little mantras actually that they utilize in their days that I thought were really nice, and I'm hoping if anyone wants to share, and from the other breakout rooms as well, if there's any thoughts or comments that anyone wants to share as well, please feel free to do so.
I'm sorry, I'm not at home. I don't really have a quiet spot, but I'll just say what my family, my children and I, we say. I am whole, healthy, wealthy, wise, powerful, disciplined, and we love Jesus. And so that's what we say. And we've said it from when they were really small, and we still do it. I still call them on it, and they'll say it.
Thank you.
Something very unpopular, which is Bible believing, but that gets me through everything. That got me through this morning. So that's pretty much where I live. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Catholic, but I believe in the Bible.
Thank you for sharing that. One thing that I like to share, we were sharing like little mantras and things. Again, I mentioned this is from Thich Nhat Hanh. This was really helpful for me when I woke up and just practicing gratitude and mindfulness in my day. So whenever I'd wake up, I just kind of take some deep breaths before starting my day, and I'd say to myself or recite, waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live fully in each moment and to look at all beings with eyes of compassion. So that was something that definitely has helped me for sure starting my day.
Well, I'll be sure that I was talking about I am in transition. Every day is a new day. Yesterday can never be changed. My mindfulness is focused on navigation in the future, or especially in the present. and always looking around and saying, what gift can I give? A simple comment by saying, hey, those are really nice glasses. Or, those shoes look very comfortable. Just a simple comment for all of us as we can experience does make a difference in our lives. So that's the gift. A gift is something that they cannot return, knowing that it's not a quid pro quo. So again, back to the transition, today's a different day of tomorrow. And you look forward navigating instead of looking behind you, because you don't look in the rear view mirror every time you're driving. So it's just in transition of a future of a better day.
Thank you, Sergio.
This isn't not a mantra, but it's a little relaxation, de-stress tactic tool. And it's just 9 deep breaths. But when you do the 9 deep breaths, the first 3, you're thinking of 3 distinct things from the past that maybe are still stressing you out. So you think through each one, take a breath in, release that one, release the second one, release the third one. And again, those are from the past. And then 3 things from the present that you can't control. And you breathe each one in and you breathe it out. And then 3 things from the future that are you're worried about or have anxiety about, and breathe through each one of those. And this is a great tactic to falling asleep if your mind is racing. Usually you won't even get to the 9th thing because you're already going to be asleep. But that process of just kind of identifying and not feeling like you have to ignore the thing, but you can breathe through it and just kind of let it go. Know that at that moment you can't control it, but you're aware of it. And I found that to be a great tool.
Thank you for sharing, Francis. Well, I appreciate you all for joining us. I know we're going to move forward to sharing some resources for you all. So the first ones, oops, oh yeah, we'll skip to the hotlines and directories. Sounds good. So here we have some hotlines and directories. So on the left side, hotlines such as CalHope Crisis Counseling Program. And I will mention, well, these aren't really, these are hotlines that I think anyone nationally can utilize. I believe CalHope is specific to California, as well as the Access and Crisis line, I believe. But some other resources are Blackline, Nasiha, Strong Hearts Native, and a few others. And on the right-hand side of this page are some directories for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous People of Color therapists that might be helpful for folks navigating just the mental health system. Can be really difficult oftentimes to find a provider. But we do know it's also helpful to have a provider that resembles a community that you come from. So a lot of these directories offer that, or providers that identify within the community or have done extensive work with the community. So yeah, directories like Black Wellness Directory, Therapy for Latinx, South Asian therapists, inclusive therapists, etc.
And then we have various community resources. Again, a lot of these are based in San Diego. And if you are interested in different phone apps, we have a few here that we have listed. A lot of them are subscription, but they are available on YouTube for free if that's something that you're interested in. We like sharing these for folks who might be experiencing in the moment stress or anxiety as a way to kind of regulate. And then I see Cody also shared a mantra, what stands in the way becomes the way. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to highlight what you mentioned. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. And And that pretty much concludes it. We'll be sharing, Francis, you have the slides, and if folks are interested, they can also have access to this as well. And then to close this all out, we would like to ask if you could fill out a survey. You can use this QR code. This helps us continue to receive funding so we can continue to provide presentations like this to the rest of San Diego community and elsewhere. And if you don't have a phone with you, I also included the link in the chat. So you can go ahead and fill that out if you would like. It helps us out. You can just do the first page if you would like to, not disclose other information. Yeah, and if y'all have any questions, we're going to be here for a little bit. Thank you so much for allowing us to hold space with you all. We really appreciated all your participation, your experiences. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you both so much, and breaking down barriers for this presentation and for all your energy here, and really wonderful resources and everything you've shared. For everyone, I want to affirm that I will send around the slides and to everyone who made it and didn't make it. This video is going to be available still on our Facebook Live videos, so you can always go back and watch it or share with others. And stay tuned. We will have further information about next month's Community Summit. It is usually the third Monday of every month, which would make it Monday, April 17th. And we will be focusing in on something environmental related in honor of Earth Day. And we will share more information about that soon. If you're not already subscribed to Activist San Diego's emails, or you think you might not be receiving them correctly, please do go to activistsandiego.org and subscribe. We are also a fully member and supported organization, and it helps us organize events like this and events in the community throughout the year. So please support as you are able. Membership, a voting member, because we have an elected board. Any contribution of $24 or more a year gives you the privilege of being a voting member. But please donate as generously as you're able, so we can continue to do good work in the community. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the live stream, but you can continue to hang out and chat in this space for a while. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So appreciative
you.
of the conversation, getting to know you all. Thank you.